We've all been there. There's a new movie coming out that you just have to watch. But how do you watch it? Do you wait for it to be on a streaming service you use? Nah, that might take a while. Wait for it to be on DVD? Oh, heavens no! Who buys DVDs in this day and age?
Me!
Maybe rent it from Redbox? Wait, those are still a thing? You could always just pirate the movie. Movie theaters, a well-known international industry inching closer to becoming a brick-and-mortar endangered species. While they seem to be recovering from the lockdowns, I often wonder if they'll ever be as popular as they used to be. With the situation they're in, I thought it would be a good time to talk about movie theaters. Their positives, their negatives, and just what makes them worth returning to despite their alternatives. You're watching the LionDog Show, and I'm taking a look into the world of movie theaters. I've mentioned in a previous video that I hadn't been to a movie theater for a few years. Can you guess why? And I have to say, seeing movies somewhat regularly reminded me just why I missed seeing them in the first place. And it's not just because of the movie itself. There's the lobby, the hallways, the promos, the $20 concessions, and even the tickets. Does anyone else collect their movie tickets? Here are some of mine. Unfortunately, a few of them seem to be wearing out over time, and they're pretty much obsolete since people can just order digital tickets online or through apps. Speaking of obsolete, movie theaters themselves! With more options opening up for watching the latest movies, movie theaters have been trying to hone in on that experience to stay afloat, and I'd say they're doing a good job. We got better seats, better presentations, better and more expensive food. You can now order a full course meal while watching Despicable Me 5. Of course, one thing that doesn't need to be improved is the buildings themselves. Movie theaters have some of the best interior design. They have this weird dynamic where they mostly sport a dignified color scheme of mostly tan and dark red, but then you have a bunch of clashing standees and posters for a variety of films. I like this. It gives theaters a tone of formality with a little hint of spontaneity. There's also the hallways with walls lined with posters and with that unique carpet design, with distant sounds leaking from all the theaters around you. It's relaxing, yet gives off a sense of anticipation for the film you're about to see. After finding your theater, you then have to find your seat. While you now have to choose your seat before entering the theater, it used to be first come first served. For some strange reason, I used to love sitting at the top row. You know, the farthest row from the screen. I personally loved sitting there as I got to sit high above the rest of the audience, and I could look behind to see the projector and watch a tiny mirrored version of the movie. Recently, I prefer to sit at the end of a middle row as I can get a good view of the movie and it's easier for me to leave afterwards. Speaking of seats, does anybody else kinda miss those movie theater seats that you had to fold out before you sat in them? Those were fun to mess around with before the movie started. Sure, those new recliners are comfy and all, but their complex workings probably take a lot to maintain. Like the last time I saw a movie, the recliner I sat in looked like it was starting to come apart. Meanwhile, the fold-out chairs are a lot simpler and will most likely last longer. Besides, you can't lift up the armrest and lie down on two seats with recliners. Well, yes, I did try that once. Once you take your seat, you're greeted with the adverts, previews, and the theater's PSAs and promos, which, personally, I think have fallen off as of late. A while back, theaters used to be snazzy with their intros, integrating a variety of animation styles and mascots. Of course, some theaters opt for simplicity. Case in point, there's this generic cell phone policy warning which is sometimes used by bigger movie theater chains. These, despite their best efforts, just come off as unsettling. The logos are all in this dark void, and the background music is a relaxing piano followed by ominous sounds. Take a listen for yourself. What adds to this unease is how long these warnings last, going on for a minute when it takes, at most, 15 to 20 seconds to turn off your phone. It reminds me of some of the home entertainment logos I discussed in my childhood fears video, and how it acts relaxing and welcoming while carrying an uncanny atmosphere. Had I grown up with this policy warning, I definitely would have included it in the video. While I never saw that promo as a kid, one that I saw all the time as a kid was AMC's Magic Chairs feature presentation promo. This promo starred three 20-somethings posing as teenagers go into the movies only to be teleported into a magical forest. This one's only rivaled by AMC's current logo in terms of the one I've seen the most. As nostalgic as I am for this promo, I will admit how odd it is. Like these friends sit down for the movie with a refreshing large cup of Coca-Cola trademarked in hand, but instead they get trapped in a fantasy forest where I assume they're forced to stare at the AMC bat signal for their movie's runtime. I mean, I've heard of worse ways to spend $25, and I'm sure you'll find use for that $8 ticket someday. But in all seriousness, this bumper Avatar couldn't have been released at a better time. It made its debut in 2009, right before the release of the box office hits that were Avatar and the Alice in Wonderland remake. This bumper's CGI fantasy world fit right in with those films in their fantasy worlds. It may have not been a perfect theater intro, but it was mine for a few years. Going back to cell phone PSAs for a moment, I need to bring up this AMC one from 2005 that I recently found, and it honestly might be one of my favorites. It begins as a parody of 90s animated movie trailers, only for it to be interrupted by a Nokia ringtone. This parody nails its source material. What really sell it for me are Mark Elliott's narration and this exchange.
You ever wonder what's out there, Quill?
You mean besides vultures that want to eat us?
Like, that is the 90s animated movie exchange of all time. It's such an effective emulation of those trailers that I'm starting to experience a sort of Mandela effect where I wonder if I actually did see that PSA when I was super young and just forgot about it. So yeah, great job, Best Buy. The one thing that both of those intros were missing was a mascot. And no, Blonde Girl number 7 doesn't count. Many don't know this, but AMC used to have a mascot in the form of Clip, a stick figure made of film reels introduced in 1991. He might just be my second favorite theater mascot. I love how they made him so expressive with such a simple design. So if Clip is my second favorite theater mascot, then who is my favorite? Well, that would be none other than Cinemark's very own Front Row Joe. A cat who was cool by following the rules. It was the 90s. He, alongside a small cast of characters, starred in a variety of policy trailers all throughout the late 80s and early 90s. Almost all of these featured a doo-wop style song promoting the facilities of the theater while explaining proper theater etiquette, often by comparing the cool, rule-following Front Row Joe with the rude, rule-breaking Clyde, with the latter often being punished for his misbehavior in various slapstick ways. Then there's Elton, who initially began as Clyde's right paw cat, but later became Joe's friend in later trailers. And that's what I call a redemption arc. Lastly, there's Joe's love interest, Popcorn Penny, later Starstruck Penny. And if this YouTube comment is reliable, she got her initial name in a contest. Also, if you couldn't tell, these four were brought to life through some excellent hand-drawn animation, courtesy of William Realms Animation. However, by the 2000s, hand-drawn animation was no longer the cool form of animation, so our beloved box office Bobcat made the jump to the third dimension in a 2004 introduction coinciding with Cinemark's 20th anniversary. To be honest, I don't think he looks too bad. Yeah, he moves like an open world game NPC, but I appreciate how he maintains his cartoonish characteristics in the new style. Fast forward 4 years later to 2008 and it's a completely different story. These designs look rough, like they wanted to find some medium between realism and cartoonish, and they ended up falling right into the uncanny valley. Look how they massacred my boy. He and his girlfriend look like rejected food fight characters, which is probably the worst insult you can ever give to a character design. If you think that's bad, just wait until you stop by General Cinema and get introduced to Popcorn Bob. Now you might look at this design and think, oh, that's not so bad. Well, here's how he looked in the 90s. Good lord, that's horrendous. I take it back. These are rejected food fight characters. You can tell they were going for a modern take on the classic intermission jingle, but I definitely wouldn't want to go to the lobby if this is what they're selling. The good news is that this guy eventually disappeared. The bad news is that all the other mascots disappeared alongside him, the only exception being Front Row Joe, who returned in the late 2000s with a much improved design. As of now, theater mascots aren't really a thing anymore. The most recent ones I can think of were those AMC emoji balls, but I don't recall those lasting that long. It's probably easier for theaters to merely strike a deal with movie studios for them to create their own promos and policy trailers using their characters, since it also doubles as advertisement for upcoming movies. Alas, alongside mascots, a lot of the essence of those nostalgic theater introductions has been lost, with only Regal keeping the imaginative introduction alive with their roller coaster intros. They even upload the old intros on their YouTube channel rather than relying on others to archive them, which almost makes up for their horrible new logo. This has got to be the pinnacle of overly simplified logo redesigns. It used to be a crown, hence the name Regal, but now it's a pointed heptagon. If their latest intro is anything to go by, it's a crown seen from above, but how are we supposed to know that? A pointed crown is a well-known symbol in most cultures. This is not. No one looks at this and says, I want that on my head! Rant over. Anyways, it's a shame to see them go. It's clear that they had an impact on people, considering that there are entire YouTube channels out there dedicated to recreating the intros before movies. And I totally understand why. They had a lot of creativity when they didn't need to. People didn't pay to see the policy trailers or intros. They paid to see the movies. it didn't matter what they looked like as long as they got the point across. But those old intros helped make the experience almost as entertaining as the movie itself, and almost made each theater feel like it had a life of its own. Then again, if it doesn't matter what they look like, then why bother putting in any effort? Why spend all that money animating crazy roller coasters or designing endearing mascots that could come off as childish, when a generic announcer and simple CGI can get the job done? Oh well. At least we always have the AMC popcorn guy until they removed him for setting a bad example of theater etiquette. I guess we'll just be stuck with these mediocre modern theater introductions until they eventually get replaced with even worse theater introductions that make us nostalgic for the current ones we didn't like. Besides, it's not like these intros were perfect. When you really watch them, you come to realize that they're basically just popcorn and soda commercials in disguise. Which brings us to, yeah, I've been beating around the bush for far too long, let's discuss the concessions. Everyone has a go-to when it comes to these, and for some, their go-to is an empty stomach and a full bank account. One of my all-time favorites was the white cherry icy. My parents used to get it for me every time we went to the movies, and it was delicious. For the first few minutes until it froze up and you were basically trying to suck up a block of ice through a straw. Yeah, you're probably better off just getting a $10 Coke. I think the highlight of theater concessions was the special popcorn buckets and drink cups they released throughout the years. I'd love to see a collection of these. And the low light of the concessions are probably what you'd expect. I've alluded to this throughout the entire video, but the concession prices are notoriously high. And when I'm talking high, I mean $15 for a regular soda and popcorn high. Oh, the things I did for you, Puss in Boots. In the theater's defense, they're forced to split ticket sales with the movie studios, so inflating the concession prices are their way of compensating, but this comes off more as an excuse than a tragic backstory if you ask me. As a child, my parents bought all the snacks for me, so I was completely naive to the pain that their wallets took until I was 14. I went with a group for a friend's birthday party to go see Civil War, the Marvel movie, not the actual war. That would have been a weird birthday party. I had $5 to buy a drink, but when I reached the concession stand, I found out that I couldn't even afford a small drink. So I settled for a pack of cinnamon rolls that got my hands all sticky, and because of that, I spent 2 or so minutes in the bathroom washing my hands and missing a part of the movie. You might think that's a negative, but I see it as a positive. This might be my biggest unpopular opinion on this channel thus far, but I actually enjoy using the bathroom during a movie. Of course, there's the obvious reason that I need to use the bathroom. Simply missing a few moments of the film is better than holding it in, or the other alternative. Second, I don't like sitting for a long period of time, so getting up to use the restroom is a good excuse to stretch my legs. Finally, I miss scenes. This works both ways. If it's a movie I don't like, then I don't have to watch the movie for a few minutes. And if it's a film I enjoy, then missing scenes gives me incentive to rewatch the movie and to see the scenes I missed. Now, I know it sounds like I'm ragging on any other way to watch movies, which is by no means the case. It is a very good thing that people have cheaper and more convenient options to watch recent movies, whether it be on streaming services or video on demand. Theaters also have issues of their own, like being sold out on big releases, it being harder to find showtimes for smaller films, and how your experience heavily depends on who's in your audience, most notoriously children. I don't think it'll disappear entirely. They'll probably end up like arcades, merely luxuries for certain areas while most people access their content at home. But it's still unfortunate to see the movie theater experience become less and less prevalent. I think the best example of the power of the theater experience is one of my own. One of my favorite films in recent memory was Fantasy Creations' The Villainous People. When I saw that film in theaters, you couldn't take me away from that film. However, when I bought it on Blu-ray, it took me a week to rewatch the full movie. It wasn't because I no longer liked the movie, it's just that in the context of my house, the film now had a lot more competition for my attention. Like, there are so many other things I could be doing with my time. Here, I made a list. When you see a movie in theaters, when you turn off your phone, recline in your seat, and watch a movie on a giant screen, you truly appreciate it, away from all your distractions. It forces you to focus on one single experience and allows you to truly be immersed in it. It feels like in an age where everything is so interconnected, where everything demands our attention, the movie theater experience is one of the last remaining experiences that is just one single experience. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm gonna go do one of the things on that list I made. You've been watching the LionDog Show. Have a great day, and stick around for more.